Now, I did 34 and a half years in the Metropolitan Police Service. I'm immensely proud to have been a police officer and immensely proud to have been a Metropolitan Police Officer, but this is the one period in my career which just troubles me greatly.
In 1998, Clive Driscoll was a detective working on a delicate case. Police in Liverpool had arrested a man called John Carroll. He was accused of offences in Liverpool and Lambeth. Carroll had been the manager of a children's care home in Lambeth, and Driscoll's job was to pick up the London end of the inquiry. Was there more to follow up? He thought there was. And among several potential witnesses he wanted to talk to was this man, Paul Boateng, a rising star in Tony Blair's government. Approaching any minister would have been awkward, but speaking to Boateng would have been particularly so. He had just been appointed minister in charge of the police. Newsnight has spent 18 months investigating what happened in this borough back then, and one thing's for sure, it's as controversial now as it ever was. This story begins with Driscoll's investigation, Operation Trawler. The prime focus of inquiries was this man, John Carroll. He would eventually plead guilty to 35 charges of indecent assault and buggery of young boys in the 1970s and 80s. He was sentenced to 10 years in jail. Police in London continued to look into Carroll's past. They wanted to be sure the full extent of his abuse in Lambeth care homes had been uncovered. It was becoming clear there were still people who might be able to shed light on his activities. Driscoll investigated through the autumn of 1998. These confidential papers record the work he was undertaking. Driscoll was told Carroll liked to get among well-known people in the local community, dignitaries, police officers, councillors. Two witnesses Driscoll spoke to mentioned the name of one particularly prominent individual Carroll appeared to have met in this way. We have spoken to both of them. One was a former social worker who'd worked under Carroll at the Angel Road care home. Her name was Teresa Johnson. Her identity has never been revealed before. She told us she had seen many visitors come and go from the home. One of them, she says, was Paul Boateng. She says she saw him on up to 6 occasions and once spoke to him in the reception area.
And by the office there was a table with a visitor's book, and everybody that comes into the home has to sign the visitor's book. I said, "Excuse me, can you sign the visitor's book?" And he signed it.
You saw his name on there?
Yeah.
The second person who had spoken to Driscoll was a youth worker from a local charity which ran annual caravan holidays for young people in care. He told us John Carroll attended these camps, and he remembered many local dignitaries visiting or helping out too. One of them, he says, was Paul Boateng.
John Carroll would regularly talk about him being able to open doors for him. John Carroll was someone who believed that he should have been someone far more significant.
You definitely, from your own recollections, you saw John Carroll with this man?
Definitely.
On how many occasions?
Quite a few.
There was a third piece of information in Driscoll's files. In the mid-1980s, John Carroll attempted to foster children. Lambeth supported the application, but needed a neighbouring borough, Southwark, to second it. Southwark refused. Why? Because they discovered that Carroll already had a conviction for child abuse dating back to the 1960s. Southwark couldn't believe that Lambeth Council knew about this and hadn't sacked him. Newsnight has been told the decision provoked a bitter row between the two councils. We've been told that a few days later, the official who took the decision to block the fostering application received a phone call from a man who identified himself as Paul Boateng, though the official couldn't be sure it was him. The caller had asked him if there was anything he could do to help resolve the row around Carroll's fostering. The offer was not taken up. There is no suggestion they were aware of Carroll's previous conviction. Driscoll told colleagues he needed to talk to Paul Boateng in case he could shed light on Carroll's activities. And then, to his astonishment, he was axed. One of those who knew Driscoll was about to approach Boateng was the senior Lambeth official, Nigel Goldie. But Goldie thought the detective had told too many people about his plans. He says he raised his concerns within Lambeth Council. Within days, Goldie had been spoken to by another police officer called Richard Gargini. Goldie says Gargini told him to forget about Driscoll and his leads.
Clive had been suspended from the investigation. He was going to be disciplined. He'd been interviewed and found that he had nothing, and that, to all intents and purposes, the matter should be regarded as completely closed, and nothing more would be done about it, and that it should be left, and that I should not speak to anyone about it. I should just keep not.
Are you surprised that he'd been removed?
I was surprised, yes, because I was not expecting that kind of drastic action.
Driscoll is also bemused. For him, any claim that the product of his investigation had come to nothing didn't make sense. He says he hadn't told Mr. Gargini who he wanted to speak to or why. Did Driscoll get what he deserved? Or was this just a good excuse to get him out before he stirred up a political hornet's nest? A secret internal Scotland Yard report says Driscoll committed serious indiscretions, but it also refers to the political sensitivities that resulted in his removal from Lambeth. Like many senior officers at Scotland Yard, Driscoll had his critics, and he admits he can be a bit of a bull in a china shop. But the disciplinary proceedings against him were quickly dropped, and his career soared.
The Lawrence family's long wait for justice. 2 men are found guilty of murdering their son, Stephen.
When 2 of the killers of Stephen Lawrence were convicted, Driscoll was fated as the detective who finally brought them to justice. Baroness Doreen Lawrence describes Clive Driscoll as an officer with integrity. Driscoll says that he subsequently handed over his notebooks and documents to Gargini. He says they detailed the progress he was making with names of people to contact. And it was around the time that Driscoll was removed that Gargini was asked to run a new inquiry called Operation Middleton. It was on a bigger scale, and as well as police, now involved a team of specially trained social workers. They were known as the Child Abuse in Lambeth Team, or Chili for short. But Operation Middleton didn't pick up where Driscoll had left off. John Carroll was no longer the sole focus of the inquiry. Instead, detectives were tasked with looking at allegations of child abuse across all Lambeth children's homes, going back 20 years. So what happened to Driscoll's documents, his leads, his notebooks? That is one of the key unanswered questions. Why? Because Teresa Johnson told us she didn't hear from detectives again. This left her feeling distrustful of the police. Social workers did contact her some years later as part of a general sweep of all former staff. But she told us they never asked her about the information she had given Clive Driscoll. During the course of our investigation, Newsnight met with her around a dozen times. She died in September last year. The charity worker from the caravan park wasn't spoken to either. He too lost faith in the police. The Southwark official who took the adoption call was never contacted either. Some officers in Operation Middleton have told us they were unaware of the information Driscoll had compiled, information that had justified Driscoll's plan to approach the minister. One contests that Driscoll even told them, a claim that Driscoll emphatically denies. But we can reveal there was another strand of information that was presented to the police. Social workers from the Chile team discovered a document which suggested that Paul Boateng and his wife Janet had visited the Angel Road care home in the mid-1980s when John Carroll was still in charge. We've been told the information was passed to detectives on Operation Middleton. Social workers recognised the potential sensitivities. They were told it was discussed at the highest levels of the police and the Home Office. We put this to Mr. Gargini. He told us he was unable to clarify the sequence of events because I do not have access to documents or computer records in relation to Operation Middleton. He said that because there is an ongoing Met inquiry, it would be inappropriate for me to comment further. None of this suggests Paul Boateng has done anything wrong, and the police say they have never received any complaints about him. But might he have had information that could have helped the police investigation? Driscoll thought so, regardless of the sensitivities. The new inquiry did not. Met officers we have spoken to deny they bottled it and describe Middleton as a gold standard inquiry. So, why is this important? In Operation Middleton's early days, officers let it be known they had 40 offenders in their sights. It emerged 16 alleged abusers had died. Another 19 couldn't be identified. At the end of the 4-year inquiry, the police secured 3 convictions. Operation Middleton's final report noted, it would be unreasonable to judge the success of the operation solely on the basis of the number of successful prosecutions. So, where are we now? As we've made clear, there is no evidence that Lord Boateng did anything wrong. He has told us he only became aware of Carroll when Carroll was arrested in the late 1990s. In a statement, he told Newsnight,
"As a campaigning youth justice lawyer in the 1970s and 80s, I acted for many young people in care, met many of their social workers and visited many youth facilities in the course of my work. I did not know Mr. Carroll personally and have no recollection of meeting him professionally or of visiting the Angel Road Children's Home or anywhere else where he was present."
He has told us he remembered the ACYC charity, but has no recollection of visiting during the caravan holidays. And he has said he didn't make the call to a Southwark official. His statement added,
"Naturally, I would be appalled if Mr. Carroll was not properly investigated and children were harmed as a result. I am unaware as to how the investigation into Mr. Carroll was conducted, and I knew nothing at all about the matters under investigation. I therefore cannot comment on why the police did not seek my assistance in connection with this matter. I would of course have been happy to assist."
Scotland Yard launched its own internal review nearly 3 years ago. It's now being overseen by the Independent Police Complaints Commission. Now Justice Goddard has made Lambeth a priority. The questions they are looking at go to the heart of policing. Officers take an oath to act without fear or favour. Did they do that in this case? To try to help answer this question, Goddard has turned to this man. Raymond Stevenson was a boy in one of Lambeth's care homes. 18 months ago, he set up a support group for survivors. It is now more than 600 strong. You don't know what they done to me. Messing up my mind. I wish they could have seen it. Pressure all the time. If only they believed me. A music producer, he directed a video to highlight the issue of child abuse in Lambeth. He believes police avoided asking awkward questions. We have 4 pieces of information that appear to show a link, an alleged link between Paul Boateng and John Carroll. Do you think that he should have been spoken to by the police?
I know the 4 links you're talking about, and of course he should have been spoken to. Anyone with those connecting pieces of information should be spoken to, whoever they are.
Carroll now lives in the Midlands. He declined to speak to us. Here he is, with children in his care, pictures never seen before. By turns he was charming, terrifying, manipulative. Newsnight has heard many conflicting stories about Carroll's world and who was in it. But most people can agree one thing. The story of child abuse in Lambeth and the story of John Carroll has never been fully told.